Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome to the Stolen Land Episode 9, Expedition. Lucian led his people out of the trading post to start their exploration of the surrounding lands. The main goal of the expedition was to map out this area so the Sword Lords could figure out how to best set up kingdoms that would be allies with Rustland, if and when the civil war with Issia finally broke out. Fighting bandits and pacifying the area was only a secondary goal at the moment. Their entire day was spent exploring the plains around Oleg's before they finally returned to the trading post for one last night for a while. Svetlana went above and beyond with that night's meal. The first trade caravan since the expansion he promised had arrived that day, and with it came quality food. Lucian, Petra, Tiber, Umbria, Oleg, Svetlana, Keston, and the Carrick Jod ate and laughed and made merry late into the evening. Keston told the party during the meal that he had received a letter saying that the Sword Lords had been impressed by the alliance with the Soot Scales, and were arguing over the proper reward for such a deed. This turned the conversation over to talking about the several bounties that were to be had. Keston told them about one of the bounties that was for bandits, to be delivered when bandit activity in the area had noticeably decreased. This led to Oleg talking about a boar named Tuskgutter, a vicious creature that every hunter in the Greenbelt had a story about. A retired hunter named Vekel Benzin, who had lost a leg to Tuskgutter last year and was forced into retirement, had offered his longbow and 6 special animal hunting arrows and a share of the head cheese to any who brought the head to Oleg. Naturally, this, in turn, turned the conversation to Tetzelworms, and how the head of one would be a great conversation piece here at Oleg's. He even pointed to a spot on the wall above the mantle where he would mount such a thing. He claimed that the people talked about Tetzelworms like they were the most common creature on the Greenbelt, but he admitted they were actually quite rare, and he didn't know where any would be found at the moment. It was early the next morning when the Volso Expedition set out from Oleg's. Oleg and Svetlana had yet to rise for the morning. Keston Garrus was standing silently outside his tent as they left, and one of his men guarded the gate. Those two were the only two that were stirring as they left. They did not plan to return for 7 days, when the food they were taking should be close to out. They had a couple of days of wiggle room. They spent the next 2 days exploring the area along the Rustland Road, as it turned from a north-south road to an east-west road near the trading post, and then along the road to the east of Oleg's. During this entire process, Tiber was carefully taking notes and making a map with his chronicler's kit. As of right now, the map didn't contain much past the precise place where Oleg's trading post was, and a detailed look at the path of the road, but as they explored more and more of the Greenbelt, his map would grow to encompass many things. Near the end of the second day after leaving Oleg's, the party was confronted on the road by 3 wild boars who refused to allow them to go around. Lucian pulled out his longbow and took aim at one of the boars. He wanted to keep this fight at long range for as long as he could, which was probably only a few seconds as the boars started to charge. His arrow grazed one of the boars, but the creature's hide was so thick that it couldn't be pierced with such a glancing shot. The boars charged and almost reached the party before anyone else managed to shoot at them. Tiber took out his light crossbow that he had recently bought from Oleg and fired at the boars. His inexperience with the weapon was on full display as his bolt hit the ground in front of one of them. Petra took out her short bow and fired, and was the first one of them to pierce the hide of her target. The arrow struck one of the boars in its front leg, but did not seem to slow the creature in the slightest. Umbria shot a ray of frost at the boar that Petra had hit, and the front of its muzzle was coated with hoarfrost for a second before melting away. Lucian readied another arrow and shot, but the nerves of seeing the boars charging at him as he was thinking of dropping his bow and pulling out his sword and new, finely crafted metal shield caused his arrow to go far off target, which was exactly when he dropped his bow and pulled out his sword and shield. And right as Lucian finished doing that, the boars hit. The one that had been injured charged Petra, who almost managed to dodge out of the way of the creature, but a tusk carved deeply into her upper thigh. The second one attacked Lucian, bowling directly into him and goring him notably. The last boar attacked Tyre, cutting a deep gash in his torso as it hit him hard. Tiber immediately dropped his crossbow and pulled out his sword and shield. Taking stock of himself for a second, he realized he needed to pray. Casting his healing spell, his second assessment put him almost back to where he was before the fight started. Petra pulled out her short swords and went to town on the boar attacking her. Only one of her swords got in a good hit, but the one that did dug deep into the side of the creature. Umbria took out the wand she had found in Tartuk's stash and pointed it at the boar who was attacking Petra and fired. 3 magical missiles shot from the wand and slammed into the boar, killing it. Then it was Lucian's turn to start fighting back with the weapon he knew the best. He plunged the sword into the boar's neck, and then again into its back several times as it sunk to the ground, and eventually stopped moving. The third boar was so enraged and focused on its fight with Tiber that it either didn't see or care about the deaths of its 2 companions. It continued to slash Tiber with its tusks over and over, almost taking him out a second time. By this point, Tiber was pissed. And although he was more hurt now than he had been when he had cast his last spell, he went on the attack. He slashed the boar across the face, the blade sinking in as it crossed the snout. Petra rushed the boar and attacked. It didn't even see her coming, and the first it was aware of her presence was when her first sword sunk into its hide. Her flurry of attacks against it was enough to take the creature down. After the fight, the party took a few minutes to catch their breath, when Umbria surprised the entire group. She pulled out one of the daggers they had gotten from the Might Hive and sat down to start butchering the first of the boars. The other 3 watched her for a while before eventually asking her how she could help. She directed them as needed, and they ended the day on the side of the road cooking boar meat for preservation. She said at least the hides would fetch good prices when they returned to Oleg's. The next 2 days passed much like the first 2 had, as they continued to explore around the road and its surrounding environs, until Lucian had declared that they had reached the edge of the area they had been assigned to explore. The next day, they moved south and explored more of the grasslands to the south of the road. Almost nothing went into Tiber's map that day. Beyond a few small geographical landmarks, like a hillock or so, there was nothing but grass and the sounds of insects. On the 6th day since leaving Oleg's, and the last day of exploring, before they planned to return to Oleg's, they discovered a hut. The boar meat they had butchered a few days before was supplementing their rations very well, and they could last several more days in the wild before they had to return. But they had told Oleg that they would be back in 7 days, so they could not keep him waiting. They approached the hut in the wilderness cautiously, but did not expect any trouble. This was clearly one of the few denizens of the Greenbelt that Oleg sometimes talked about. Lucian was fairly sure it was a man named Boken that Oleg had mentioned in passing in one of their meals. Apparently, he was a potion maker of some kind. As they reached the front of the hut, Lucian knocked on the door. Thank you so much for listening to The Stolen Land, Episode 9, Expedition. Make sure to tune in again on May 12th for The Stolen Lands Episode 10, Boken's Hut. And make sure you tune in tomorrow, first, here on my YouTube channel, for Spaces Wide and Good Friends Are Too Few, Episode 5, and then, tomorrow evening, at 6:30 Pacific Daylight Time, make sure you tune in to my Twitch channel, where I will be streaming The Curse of Strahd with my wife and two of our friends. Thank you.